And before this video begins, I'd just like to give a special thank you to my Asbantium level patron, Fallon Cortez. Thank you for supporting the channel. It's the 31st of October, and you know what that means. It's the 160th anniversary of Nevada becoming a US state. No, that's not right. The 102nd anniversary of Mussolini becoming Prime Minister of Italy? No, it's not Mussolini Monday. Something tells me it's spookier than all these things. Oh wait, no, I've got it. It's when Vanilla Ice was born. Truly a terrifying day of horror and scares. No, of course I'm talking about Halloween. The highlight of the spooky season we all know and love so very much. And to mark the occasion, I thought it would be perfect timing to explore Doctor Who Series 10's acclaimed horror episode, Oxygen, which is one of the 12 Doctor's most well-regarded episodes, sitting comfortably in 5th on the 60th anniversary poll of his episodes. Oxygen throws the Doctor and Bill into a crisis on a space station filled with the living dead and an ever-dwindling oxygen supply. But what makes Oxygen so good? Does it deserve its reputation as a modern classic? Well, as always, that's what I'm here to find out. Actually, wait, no, right now I'm not even here. I'm at my best friend's wedding. But that's the magic of pre-recording. Anyway, enough of my yapping, grab your nearest credit card and get ready for a trip to Chasm Forge, because it's time to take a deep dive into Oxygen.
Yes, I was really hoping that someone would stay at the office.
Space is absolutely terrifying. You don't need me to tell you that. It's an endless expanse of cold, empty darkness, and we immediately get that atmosphere, no pun intended, established at the start of this episode, with the Doctor's monologue and lecture about space and its dangers. This is such a great speech, and really helps to remind us just how dangerous the setting is.
So how does space kill you?
In a lot of sci-fi media, we're so used to the safety of spacesuits and spaceships, even Doctor Who itself usually treats space like an afterthought, with air corridors allowing for characters to outright survive in the vacuum of space. But the reality of space is that it's a constant vacuum trying to kill you in every conceivable way. You can die instantly from the most minor hiccup, the smallest hole in a wall, or the most tiny tear in your spacesuit. Like the Doctor goes to great lengths to explain, space kills. It's an inhospitable universe, and we see that play out as redshirt astronauts You're Dead Number 1 and You're Dead Number 2 try to navigate the outside of the spaceship, only to find themselves attacked by these horrific spacesuit zombies. It's a fantastic opening to really drive home the terror of space, along with the need for oxygen credits and the presence of the zombies themselves. You know, all three things that are the core of the episode. I really love how Ivan can't hear Ellie being killed because of the comms issues between their spacesuits. There's just this really sudden cut from her screams to complete silence. I think it helps to reinforce how quiet and lonely space is, because sound doesn't travel, it can't. It's not like sci-fi where you can hear laser beams and explosions. It's just complete and utter terrifying silence. After all, in space, no one can hear you scream. After this intro and the Doctor's detailed explanation of dying in space, we understand just how terrifying it is. But we also find out just how much the Doctor misses space, because he finds beauty in that fear and terror. I absolutely adore the shot of him gazing out at the distant stars, longing to stride amongst them once more, but he's fighting an internal battle to keep to his oath of guarding the vault. I've mentioned it so many times before, but the Doctor is a very restless figure, always struggling to stay in the same place for too long, and his residency at St. Luke's is a prime example of this, especially now that he's given into temptation and started taking Bill out on secret trips in the TARDIS. The Doctor is desperate to return to his usual life, and he craves adventure, with lectures like these showing so clearly how much he misses it all.
I don't know. Space is great, isn't it?
We saw how much the third Doctor struggled with being exiled to Earth, but that was easier for him to deal with because he had no access to the TARDIS. He was just kind of forced to accept it all. But now we're seeing a self-imposed exile. He can and does still use the TARDIS, but he knows he shouldn't because of his responsibilities. It's an interesting position to put him in, like a recovering addict surrounded by constant temptation. Nardole is the only one to keep reminding the Doctor of his oath and his duty, but then again, it's Nardole.
I thought I sent you to Birmingham for a packet of crisps.
Nardole has a great presence in this episode, dragged along against his will and constantly trying to remind the Doctor of that importance of getting back to Earth. Not just for the vault, but also just because it's safe.
Okay then, back to the TARDIS. Lovely in there, nice and cosy.
There's a great sense of tension between the two. Nardole increasingly more frustrated at the carelessness of the Doctor, moving him beyond simple comic relief because you begin to understand the genuine care and concern coming from Nardole.
Are you gonna be like this all day?
Yeah, till you're back where you should be.
His anxiety about the Doctor growing more reckless feels very understandable and justifiable. He goes from feeling like a joyless stick in the mud to actually just feeling like a responsible friend, trying to rein in the other two before they can get themselves in trouble or hurt. Nardole is also great at stepping up in this episode when the Doctor and Bill need him to help them. He shows his usefulness really well multiple times, doing a lot of technical assistance at multiple points, kind of being a bit of a middle ground between the main duo in terms of skills and knowledge. Nardole had kind of been a background comic relief character for the first few episodes, but I feel like he really comes into his own in this one, establishing himself as a key part of the dynamic and the series as a whole, ahead of him becoming a more permanent fixture in the rest of the series, starting with this episode. Oxygen just feels so perfectly balanced with Nardole thrown into the main character dynamic. It's probably part of why I felt like Smile and Thin Ice were lacking a bit, because they needed that third person for the dynamic to really pop.
Space doors are supposed to go shook shook. Not
After a great scene in the TARDIS where the Doctor and Bill decide to sneak off into space, the trio of adventurers answer a distress call from Chasm Forge, a really gorgeous space station that looks incredible. I do like the little exchange where the Doctor mentions distress calls being the way to see the universe's true face, and it's a very good point, a nice layer to his character and his motivations. I also love both the name and the look of Chasm Forge. It's a really great space station, and I honestly wish we would get more things like it. You know, I never thought I would miss space stations so much, but oh my god, I'm just so sick of Doctor Who being set on Earth all the time. Give me space and space stations and alien planets, please. I appreciate the very analog nature of the monitors and the surfaces, with lots of bulky buttons everywhere. It reminds me a lot of 70s and 80s horror, like Alien, for example.
Look at this. Classic design.
I think the whole look and feel of the episode also feels reminiscent of The Expanse, which had started airing right as this series was in production. The spacesuit design with, like the oxygen shield bubbles and the use of mag boots feel really similar to that show in a good way. A different take on space aesthetics compared to how the show previously handled it before. I just love the look and feel of space in the whole Capaldi era. It's so distinct and different to previous eras, and perfectly fits the more high concept nature of the 12th Doctor era and makes everything look so incredible. It's so unsettling when the space station is all dark and derelict at the start. There's such a great feeling of isolation and mystery as the protagonists explore this massive deserted space station and its dark corridors, only to find these zombified astronauts everywhere and the suits doing tasks on autopilot. It's such a strong establishment of tension and mystery at the very start of the story. But before the Doctor and co can explore further, they suddenly find themselves accused of having unlicensed oxygen, sealing them away from the TARDIS with an oxygen purge.
You there, sir? I certainly hope you've got a license.
Well, no,
I always appreciate when episodes just explain why the Doctor can't just go back to the TARDIS and leave. By separating him from his way out, the episode can just focus on the story it wants to tell without needing to worry about the plot holes of the main characters just walking away. It's the same with the sonic screwdriver being quickly broken, taking away the Doctor's get out of jail free card. And as you probably know, I always respect episodes that remove the sonic screwdriver because of how much the show tends to rely on it to escape the need to create internal logic. You know, when everything can be fixed with a sonic screwdriver, why is there any danger or fear to begin with?
Can you imagine how unbearable I'm going to be when I pull this off?
This scene also establishes the reason the episode is titled Oxygen, because it's a limited resource on the space station, something people have to buy even if they're not official members of the crew, like, as I mentioned, our main characters, who are forced to get into spacesuits just to survive because of the leftover oxygen credits within them. I really love this approach to oxygen, something we take for granted here on Earth, and we don't even have to think about breathing. But in space, breathable air is already a luxury, just by design. But this episode decides to up the ante even more by making it a literal commodity that can be bought. It feels like something out of a Douglas Adams story or a Red Dwarf episode. Companies selling oxygen and killing anyone who dares to breathe air that belongs to the almighty company. It's an absurd concept, but that's what makes the satire so biting, because like the Doctor later says, it's the end point of capitalism. The ultimate greed and desire to own and monetize every little aspect of our lives. Whether you like it or not, it's a system built on endless growth. So the exaggerated social commentary actually works really well here, because, you know, who wouldn't try and sell oxygen to astronauts? This limited oxygen doesn't just serve as a powerful commentary on corporate exploitation. It's also a plot device that adds a lot of stakes and tension to the episode, because every single breath is a matter of life and death. Of course, this happens pretty often in sci-fi in general, because, you know, the nature of space. You don't get much oxygen. Like I mentioned earlier, space is always trying to kill you, just by existing. It's very easy to run out of oxygen if anything goes wrong, because, you know, it's not natural to space. You need an atmosphere for it, or failing that, you create your own, which is what artificial gravity and artificial oxygen is. It's all just human-made stuff. But what makes this instance of the idea of running out of oxygen so good is that nothing has gone wrong. It's just the way this space economy works, making the fear of running out of air even more terrifying and scary because it's completely unnecessary on a basic human rights level.
Oxygen is available for personal use only at competitive prices.
I think this approach to oxygen and breathing as a narrative tool creates a similar level of horror as Blink, which had the mere bodily function of blinking becoming a danger to your life because of the weeping angels. Here, it's the same, but with breathing, taking something our body has to do automatically and making that a part of the core threat of the episode as a whole. Much like any automatic bodily function, you don't think about breathing, until now, because I've mentioned it. So imagine the stress you would be under if you had to focus on your every breath and try to conserve the very air you're used to breathing without issues. Unless you've got asthma, I guess. It's made especially worse because, you know, you have a literal counter to say, oh yeah, by the way, in this amount of breaths, you're gonna be dead. It's a terrifying premise for horror, and I just love it so much, giving us this limited amount of breath for all the main characters throughout the whole episode as they get closer and closer to running out.
I love it.
I think the capitalist horror of the oxygen management is further deepened with the revelation that the suits have been programmed to conserve precious resources by eliminating the crew once they're no longer profitable.
You've become inefficient.
Again, it's a sense of ruthless efficiency, serving as a clear critique of corporations and greed, putting a spotlight on the extent of profit and money being valued more than human life itself. It's especially poignant after the Doctor gave that powerful speech about the value of human life in Thin Ice. So it continues to send an evergreen, timely message that resonates deeply with all of us. It shows the ever-present dangers of unchecked corporate power running rampant as it dehumanizes workers, treating them as expendable assets that can be killed without hesitation and used as mindless drones. The spacesuits doing the work for free without needing to eat, drink, or be paid or anything. I've never really cared too much about zombies in horror fiction. They've been so overused ever since the height of things like The Walking Dead, but I think Oxygen brings a fresh spin to the undead concept, having the dead bodies being controlled like this and serving as a metaphor for the lack of human autonomy under corporate rule. The idea of wage slavery dates back centuries. Even Cicero wrote about it, suggesting that working for wages is a pledge of their slavery. And along with wage slavery, there's always been the idea of corporate drones, people walking through workdays like zombies because their jobs are so unrewarding and benign that they can't survive without them. I think the spacesuit zombies are a fun, literal interpretation of both of these concepts. Quite literally corporate drones slaving away without any autonomy. A really illuminating way to drive the critique home through the use of the monsters themselves. Although, once again, we have a Series 10 episode where the monsters are kind of misunderstood and the humans are the real villains. Although at least this time it's a little bit better handled.
Charging for the air you breathe. She hasn't changed.
Of course, like any traditional Doctor Who base under siege story, the protagonists end up encountering a group of survivors led by Your Dead Number 2, who's actually still alive and called Ivan. Oh wait, is the leader actually his identical generic white man twin Tasker? Seriously, these guys are basically the exact same. Oh, and they got the Blue Man group over here.
Great, we rescued a racist.
This ragtag group only managed to survive because they happened to be off-grid when everything went wrong, but obviously they're only really here for exposition and to die. They're fine, I guess. The scene introducing them is good for showing the extent of the damage and the stakes of the episode, along with offering a lot of theories about what is actually happening and why, giving us a lot of information that comes into play later on. But as actual characters, they're probably the weakest of Jamie Matheson's Doctor Who episodes. And that's saying a lot because he also wrote Girl Who Died. Also, Abby is just really spiteful and petty right from the start all the way until the end. I guess she's basically this episode's Fenton, but yeah, I just don't like a character like this.
Maybe find some of that and leave the big picture till later, yeah?
Anyway, with these characters all established, at least to an extent, we now have a plan and a goal, which is to get to the core of the space station, with the spacesuits now getting smarter and able to repair the door keeping them out. I do love this touch, increasing the stakes throughout the episode by always evolving the threat. Since the zombies themselves aren't the danger, it's the spacesuits and the AI controlling them. Matheson did originally want Gus to reappear in this story as the main antagonist, hence the whole Ganymede systems thing, but I guess he couldn't figure out how to utilize him since the AI here acts a lot different to that previous villain, and yeah, there's no easy way to tie it to the same kind of character that Gus was in Mummy on the Orient Express. Anyway, as the protagonists try to escape the zombies, whose marching reminds me a lot of the Cybermen, the characters have to go out into space, only for Bill's spacesuit to malfunction and remove the helmet. This moment is honestly terrifying, especially with the reminder of the lecture at the start, which went to great pains to tell us of the gruesome death Bill is now facing.
Which means that your sweat and your saliva will boil.
Bill is quite a light-hearted, curious and grounded companion, excited to experience life beyond Earth. But when this happens, she has such an intense feeling of terror and helplessness communicated perfectly by Pearl Mackie. It's multiple different fears rolled into one. Not only the fear of dying in space, but also the fear of not being in control of your own body. Because no matter what Bill does, she can't put her helmet back on thanks to the suit always overriding her. The panic here feels so real and traumatic, forcing Bill to confront the deadly reality of travelling with a doctor. Sure, she's seen other people die before and she's managed to acclimatise herself to that, but she's never been this close to her own death, and I love how the episode is able to make you really feel that fear and anxiety, because she knows there's literally nothing she can do to survive. She doesn't even get much time to think about what's happening, especially when the airlock opens and she's forced into the silence of the vacuum, only hearing the ringing in her ears as her face starts to frost up in such a striking visual. I just love the way the scene is shot and directed. It really ramps up the stakes so much higher than ever before because our main character herself is facing this danger. I especially like how her vision becomes all laggy, desaturated and red tinted as her blood heats up and she loses reduces the moisture in our eyes. It's great attention to detail and in keeping with that more realistic treatment of space. Well, as realistic as Doctor Who could really get. However, Bill soon finds herself waking up just fine, albeit with a little bit of oxygen deprivation, because the Doctor had given her his helmet in order for her to survive. This is obviously Doctor 101 prioritising someone else instead of him, because he always believes it's the right thing to do, even if he could die himself. Well, of course, as long as it's a companion. There's been many instances where he wouldn't do such a thing for a complete stranger. Of course, because the Doctor isn't human, he stands a bit more of a chance in the vacuum of space, but he still pays the price by losing his eyesight, which is actually quite an accurate injury you can get if you somehow manage to survive your exposure to space and manage to get your helmet back on before you die. It's a really shocking and emotional reveal, punctuated with some great scoring by Murray Gold. I love how the Doctor immediately focuses on reassuring Bill and joking around with her to make her feel better, because anyone in her position would blame themselves.
Failing that, I think I've got some spare eyes somewhere. They're from a lizard, but I'm sure they'll fit.
It continues to build up this sweet relationship between the pair. How the Doctor is this supportive, nurturing presence looking out for Bill, even if he has to lie to her about how temporary and insignificant this injury is for him. He claims it will barely hold him back and he can easily adapt to it, but the Doctor has always relied on all of his senses, so it's a devastating consequence that immediately raises the stakes of the episode. A game changer, forcing him to rely on others more than ever before. The Doctor, who usually holds all the answers and can do pretty much anything, is now at a major disadvantage, and the entire dynamic is turned on its head thanks to this new vulnerability. Although, once again, Abby is kind of a dick about it.
Don't mean to hurry you, but in 700 breaths I'll be dead.
However, despite the Doctor struggling to cope with all the limitations now imposed on him, things seem to be coming up Millhouse as a rescue ship responds, only for Abby to continue being a Fenton, and Dar-Ren gets killed in the most casual way possible. Great stuff. Things only worsen as Bill's suit malfunctions once more, with no way out this time as the zombies close in. It's another really tense moment, continuing to drive home the criticisms of corporations as the passive-aggressive AI refuses to budge and threatens them all with fines if they try to interfere.
Fines may be incurred.
Great, I get fined for dying.
Once again, it plays into the fear of not being in control of your own body, especially because they have to leave Bill behind. I absolutely love how Capaldi and Mackie play this scene. It's left so ambiguous if the Doctor is being honest when he promises Bill will see him again, because we already know the Doctor lies to people when they're about to die, knowing that it's better for them to die with a sense of hope. And Bill even calls him out on this, with him unable to answer if he would say the same thing whether she would live or die. I just love this scene so much. It's a really great mini character piece in a vacuum. Again, no pun intended. Showing who the Doctor and Bill really are as people. And hey, that kind of goes back to the start of the whole distress call thing. It's like poetry, it rhymes. Bill is left to her fate, and her last thoughts are of her mum, which makes her apparent death all the more tragic and emotional, especially when we immediately then see Bill as yet another zombie puppet, nothing more than a corpse controlled by a suit, and driving home how quick her fate was. I also love how shaken the Doctor is by this loss of his companion and close friend. He blames himself, even if we later find out that he knew he should be fine anyway. The Doctor has always had a duty of care for their companions, especially during the Moffat era, so it's a good moment in the episode, allowing us to see that part of his character without giving away his plan.
Doctor, it wasn't your fault. You couldn't have saved her.
But like we saw in Thin Ice, the Doctor doesn't have time to dwell on his losses when there are others to save. So he immediately jumps back into action and starts to implement his last resort plan to blow the whole station up if they die. I love the misdirection here, distracting ourselves from the genius of his plan by suggesting he's given up and wants to take revenge in some big grand sacrifice.
It's revenge as bright as the sun. It's revenge you can see across galaxies.
Especially with his speech about dying well. I also love how he reveals the horrific truth behind the station and the smart suits.
The suits are doing exactly what they were designed to do.
Ever since we met the survivors, they, and therefore we, have operated under the assumption that there's been some sort of malicious hack, and that there's some evil mastermind controlling them this whole time. However, this climax reveals that everything is actually working completely as intended, with the spacesuits designed to kill inefficient workers to save precious oxygen for their replacements, with that so-called rescue ship actually just the new, fresh crew coming in to take over the operation in an endless cycle. Like the Doctor mentions, these workers are just organic components. They're just parts of a corporate machine that couldn't care less about them, just their profit margins. It's a great way to punctuate that social commentary in a final, undisputable flourish. It doesn't dance around the social commentary, it doesn't dip its toes in to try and say something without actually committing, or outright contradicting itself like, I don't know, kablam.
The systems aren't the problem. How people use and exploit the system, that's the problem.
But it says it with a full chest, and that confidence makes the episode really hit a home run with the ending, because, it actually believes in the message it's sending.
Like every worker everywhere, we're fighting the suits.
And, of course, this fantastic speech from the Doctor about taking away the bottom line and denying the company its property is what solves the crisis. I love how his theme swells up as he reveals how expensive their deaths will be, because of how he had tied their vital signs to the station's reactor.
A moment ago, we were too expensive to live. Now we're more expensive dead.
Like I said, the episode really isn't afraid to just be upfront about its message, and that's what makes it so effective. And I really like how this ingenuity is what saves the day. A clever solution to defeat the system and reverse the situation by putting the control in the hands of the employees, who theoretically on paper should be the most valuable asset for any company. It's one of the most satisfying and fitting climaxes for a modern Doctor Who episode, one that stays true to the show's ever-present ethos of outsmarting instead of overpowering the villains. Doctor Who has always been about this kind of cunning and the power of brains over brawn, so I think the ending works really well in that regard.
Let's teach them a lesson they will never forget.
The Doctor's quick thinking is also very present within Bill's survival, since it's revealed that he realised her suit didn't have enough power for a lethal dose, so she was able to escape the same death as all the others. Of course, she still went through a lot of pain, which I think excuses the fake-out death, since there's actually a feeling of consequence there. It's a really emotional moment as the Doctor and Bill reunite to triumphant music, once again showing how much he cares for her. And Nardole joining the cuddle just helps complete the feeling, although watching it after Twice Upon a Time's callback really hurts right here. The episode ends remarkably similarly to The Almost People, with the Doctor dropping the survivors off at head office to make a complaint about the treatment of the workers. And thanks to the magic of science fiction, it actually works, with a rebellion happening 6 months later and ending the capitalist control of outer space.
Like that's ever gonna happen.
Like I said, it's the magic of science fiction. The fiction really does a lot of heavy lifting there. Anyway, after all the danger and the death of the episode, the Doctor returns to the safety of his office at St. Luke's University. Of course, Nardole soon comes out to reprimand him for his carelessness in leaving the vault unguarded, but then we have that incredible reveal that the Doctor is actually still blind. His supposed cure in the TARDIS was just a trick to make his eyes look like his sight has been restored. I really like how his complete demeanour changes the moment Bill leaves his study, showing us how the Doctor's putting on this brave face for her sake because he's trying to hide it from her and prevent her feeling guilty or worrying about him. It's such a fantastic cliffhanger for the episode, especially because we already saw how he was struggling with this new physical limitation, so now we're left to worry about how this will affect him in the long term, because it's such a lasting consequence, changing the way we think about how the rest of the series will play out. And I think this permanent blindness also makes Bill's helmetless survival not feel like a cop-out, because it has this lasting effect on the Doctor in this way, which is perfect for preventing things feeling cheap.
He's mostly okay, but he paid a price.
Doctor Who Series 10 has a pretty rocky start, with the pilot kicking things off really strongly and then the series losing that momentum with the 3 subsequent episodes. However, Oxygen really marks a high point for the series. It's a truly fantastic episode and it definitely deserves its reputation as a modern classic. The space station setting is realised superbly, it looks great, and the slightly emphasis on slightly more grounded and realistic approach to space is a breath of fresh air compared to some previous episodes. The smart suit space zombies look incredible, and I love how the episode uses them as a physical allegory for being a mindless drone working for a corporate machine. This kind of social commentary is a big part of what makes the episode work so well, since sci-fi has always been a vehicle for narratives like these. Just look at how the Alien franchise has Weyland-Yutani as just as much, if not more of a villain as the Xenomorphs themselves. And that's what sci-fi is all about, holding a mirror to present day issues and exploring them through the lens of something as seemingly absurd as spacesuits killing their wearers for wasting oxygen. I appreciate the episode and its commentary even more, considering the episode would have originally been about some like crystalline entity puppeting people or whatever, and Darren would have just had like a spider face and it's all just blech. This version is so much better. Oxygen perfectly utilizes its main trio, promoting Nardole to being a proper companion by giving him a lot more to do besides basic comedy, and it also has some great scenes between the Doctor and Bill, especially when they're facing the dangers they do face in this episode, because yeah, there's some severe consequences stemming from the permanence of the danger in these episodes. It's great stuff. Overall, Oxygen easily earns an A rank on the Series 10 tier list. It's such a step up from the previous few episodes, and another banger from Matheson, right up there with Mummy on the Orient Express and Flatline before it. It's just one of those episodes that gets everything right, and it's great viewing, full of everything you want and expect from modern Doctor Who, although the side characters could have been a little bit better. But anyway, what do you think of Oxygen? Is it as great as they say, or does it deprive you of some satisfaction? Let me know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye. And I'd just like to give a special thank you to my Asbantium level patron Fallon Cortez, my Platinum level patron Matthew Burns, and my Gold level patrons Chris Douglas and Daniel Shillito. Thank you so much for your support.